Part 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, Snorlax. In the middle of a secluded forest, animals roamed, birds tweeted and rivers flowed. This particular forest was ripe with life and fertility, so much so, that a human settlement was made just beside it. But unbeknownst to most humans, they carried and produced cursed energy. Meaning, of course, that a cursed spirit should form in no time. And that it did, many cursed spirits were made. The legendary fly heads. However, the humans had a folk tale about a monster in the woods that gobbles people up. This led to the creation of a cursed spirit. The cursed spirit, Snorlax. Wait, no, not just yet. The cursed spirit, Munchlax. Ah yes. Standing at a whopping 2 feet and 3 inches, it ran around happily. It had just been born, and so it pranced around like it had not a care in the world. The Munchlax is a small, round and teal-colored creature with a cream spot on its chest that resembles a bib. Its round head is teal in its top half and cream on the bottom half. It has big round eyes and similarly big pointed ears. 2 pointy teeth would stick out of its mouth, even if closed. With 5 claws for fingers and cream feet with 3 clawed toes, it could gather any food it wanted. Covered in fur, it is quite adorable, and the fur close to the bottom of a Munchlax resembles a robe. After this, little Munchlax ran around with cursed energy flaring as if it were as easy as breathing. Multiple cursed spirits seemed to take notice. Multiple flying abominations crept forward, tentatively. As soon as one got close, the Munchlax burst forward with a surge of cursed energy and simply swallowed it whole. The others soon followed as it happily ate them all. While digesting the spirits, it can be noted that the Munchlax's own cursed energy flared, getting stronger with each chew. Then the Munchlax found a nice and tall tree and sat down beside it, falling asleep with a full belly. He had a very nice dream where he was sat on an infinite pile of apples which jumped into his mouth themselves. Truly, it could be called bliss. Upon waking once more, his stomach growled loudly. And so Munchlax jumped back up, raised his arms into a T-shaped position and ran freely throughout the forest, to the closest cursed energy signature he could find. After 8 minutes of running, he came across a rocky outcrop where another cursed spirit lay. It was quite small and resembled a deformed bird. Its wings were leathery and thin, its body was plump and bulging, and its feet were sharp like razors. It also looked tasty. And so, without wasting any time, Munchlax jumped down, landing right on top of it, and latched onto its legs with his mouth. His stubby hands grabbed the body and held it while he chewed. The bird screeched and battered him with its wings. The Munchlax kept on eating. After 5 minutes of slowly eating, the Munchlax burped, sat down against the rocks and fell into slumber once more. He awoke and was testing cursed energy and its flow throughout his body. It felt comforting and made him squeal in excitement. Until the hunger returned. He shook his head and began running around once more. After coming to a stop, he looked up a tree and saw a cursed spirit sitting on a branch. It was a large squirrel with elongated arms and legs that were incredibly thin. However, it had a larger amount of cursed energy. The Munchlax leapt as high as he could and latched onto the bark, gripping it like a koala. He continued to slowly climb upward until he reached the branch that the squirrel sat on. The squirrel watched intently but remained. Weaker curses tend to group up, and so it believed they would work together. But after the Munchlax gained the proper footing, he immediately leapt and straddled the squirrel before shoving its head in his mouth and biting it clean off. Purple blood sprayed as the body tried to reform, but Munchlax just swallowed the rest entirely before it could. It was quite the meal. But what comes after a meal? A nap, of course. And so he lay in the tree, holding the branch tight and drifting off. He awoke with an itch in his head. It was like he was on the verge of an epiphany. However, hunger takes priority, and so he skipped down to the river. The water wasn't loud, it was calm, but cursed energy was slightly leaking from a part just ahead. Munchlax had never seen water before, so he stood on the bank silently and watched the water flow by. He stayed like this for 20 seconds before squatting down and slowly reaching his hand. The cold water soaked his fur. It did not feel nice. He instinctively pulled his hand back and focused on the cursed energy residuals inside. It led down the stream. Something was inside it. Munchlax ran down without a care, splashing his surroundings with his wet hand as he bounced around. The river became larger and larger until it became a pond. Inside the pond, cursed energy flickered. The clouds had parted and the sun shone brightly. Munchlax didn't quite like water, and yet he cannonballed in and grabbed a large slimy fish. Fangs protruded as Munchlax rose out of the water with it in hand, and it tried to bite Munchlax. However, it was bit first. Half of its body was consumed with one bite. Munchlax didn't even chew before shoveling the rest in. A couple smaller curses stayed a little too close to Munchlax and were grabbed quickly. They were eaten before they had even that realized they were out of the water. Munchlax waded back to land and found a small pile of rocks which he gathered in his arms. Then, he walked over to a crooked tree when the roots were showing a small space to lie in and crawled in. He placed the rocks at the entrance and had to shovel a little dirt with his paws before curling up and falling asleep. While he was sleeping, his cursed energy expanded across his entire body, filling it with light as a sphere of pure energy condensed around him. Then, in an instant it disappeared, and what lay there was no longer a Munchlax. A slight snore could be heard as a large snot bubble formed in his left nostril. A long time later, the cursed spirit, Munchlax, is now the cursed spirit, Snorlax. His plump belly remained in the little pit where Munchlax once was, his head jutted out the back of the tree and his feet and arms did the same. He was laying in a star-like position, and the tree had forcibly been pushed upwards due to his sheer size. You see, a Snorlax is a huge, bipedal, dark blue-green animal with a cream-colored face, belly and feet. Its arms and feet are very small in comparison to its belly. Its head is large with two small, pointed ears and two other protruding teeth coming from its lower jaw. His feet are round with 3 claws and his arms have only 5 claws on each hand. At an astounding 11 feet 9 inches (3.58 meters), he has a weight of 2,050.3 pounds. He sat upwards, ripping the tree out of the ground with his sheer mass as it collapsed to the floor with a thud. Surrounding him were small, grounded curses. They crawled across the floor and had sat next to the Snorlax, at peace. However, the Snorlax's belly rumbled and he got down and placed the small curses in his mouth, one by one. After feasting, he stood up and walked away from the pond. In the distance he could feel a large presence of uncontained cursed energy. He lumbered towards it slowly. Upon finding a clearing, he saw a large white-colored cursed spirit, with black lines running across their body. Their head was like helmet and 2 branches protruded from its face. Its left arm was entirely black with a large flower on its left shoulder. The other arm was completely white and did not have a flower adorning its shoulder. The spirit, Hanami, turned around to see the lumbering giant. Snorlax actually gave off a calming aura for cursed spirits, and this was not the same for humans. He slowly lumbered towards Hanami before resting right beside it. Hanami looked up and saw a happy, smiling Snorlax. But once Hanami looked away, Snorlax opened his jaw wide. His gaping mouth clamped over Hanami's head and pulled with all his might. Cursed energy flared as Hanami tried to fight back, but it was too late. Hanami's head came clean off and Snorlax swallowed it in one go before shoving the rest into his mouth. He burped loudly and lay down. The sun shined on him warmly and lulled him into a deep slumber. An unknown sorcerer's paw. A sorcerer had heard of a local legend concerning the nearby forest. Apparently a beast lived in there that preyed upon anything it could get their hands on. The sorcerer had understood that this meant a curse would mostly likely be there, but he did not believe it would be to such an extent. While in the woods he believed to have found the source. The source he believed was a curse born from the fear of land-based natural disasters, until he saw it. A huge lumbering beast that horrified him to his very core appeared in the clearing. The behemoth of the creature exuded a crushing aura that made the disaster curse pale in comparison. He had never felt such a pressure before. It rooted him in place and forced him to watch its hunt. The beast simply sat down next to the curse and ripped its head clean off in seconds. The curse didn't even get to react. And yet the sorcerer had seen that bottomless pit, wrongfully called a mouth. It was something else entirely, perhaps created from a universal fear. And then it sat down, let out a bone-chilling war cry and fell asleep. It snores loudly and horrendously. Every breath felt like a weight on your very soul. Every snort felt like hell had opened its gates. The sorcerer was now covered in sweat and raised both hands to his forehead. His crude stitches had nearly come undone from the pure sweat and shaking he had just gone through. He slowly backed away as he noticed lower-grade cursed spirits gathering around the sleeping behemoth, some even resting on his belly. "Well, I can work with this," he uttered before slinking away, back towards the settlement. Unbeknownst to the slumbering Snorlax, that sorcerer appeared many more times, each time documenting and experimenting on the many sleeping curses that surrounded the Snorlax. This helped with his research a lot. Just finding curses to experiment on without repercussions was hard enough. The experiments themselves had high death rates, but when the Snorlax was involved they just kept on coming. It was truly a gift from the heavens above. This continued for many years. The sorcerer was careful to not kill many curses. He needed a distraction so that he wouldn't be killed if it suddenly woke up. The Snorlax was actually having a nice dream. It started as a nightmare where he kept getting attacked and couldn't sleep. The attackers then developed a weapon to completely destroy him, and no, it wasn't a diet. His adversaries unleashed an attack compromised of positive energy, but then the Snorlax awakened. He found his cursed technique in the very depths of his being. And it was so, the attackers were defeated and the Snorlax was at peace. In a way, it was an even better peace because he now knew what it would be like to go without rest. It made his sleep all the sweeter. After a long time, he woke once more. He let out a loud bellowing that scared all nearby birds and looked around him. Dozens and dozens of small curses were laying out around him, and so he got onto his belly and scooped them all into his mouth. But then he noticed a larger creature, one that stayed away from the group. It resembled a large deer, and yet its eyes were crimson and its fur was a dark green. Snorlax decided to stand up and walk over to the deer. But it remained intelligent. It turned to bolt but felt a crushing presence behind. Snorlax instantly activated his cursed energy and moved at speed such an animal of his caliber shouldn't be able to even fathom. He bit down. While Snorlax was chewing on his prey, his eyes drifted towards another cursed energy signature not far from him. At first glance it seemed like there was a lot of cursed energy, so it should be tasty. But this was wrong. That particular being's cursed energy was so horrific and twisted that Snorlax didn't even want to eat it. However, cursed energy is also comforting. So Snorlax decided to take a look for himself. Snorlax turned around to see a human. He was quite small to the Snorlax but had long black hair and a not so flattering face. Most notably, he had crude stitches done on his head, likely with flimsy materials and no expertise. The human is a sorcerer, even Snorlax could tell considering his amount of cursed energy. But then the sorcerer did something strange. Even though he was being stared at by a being of pure destruction, he waved his hand. Snorlax took a couple of steps forward to be right next to him and placed a hand on his chest while looking down. Snorlax. To Snorlax it was a greeting. He was interested in this sorcerer. "So you are capable of speech, how wonderful." "Snorlax," he said again before plopping himself down. His voice wasn't held back this time, causing the sorcerer's hair fly back and he had to hold onto his head so it wouldn't slide off. "Is that your name?" Snorlax swayed back and forth in excitement. "I see." Snorlax then beckoned him closer and rubbed his belly. "Oh." The sorcerer came closer as Snorlax contemplated eating him. But then the sorcerer rubbed his belly and gave him a hug. "Snorlax," Snorlax said with glee. The sorcerer chuckled. "Yes, hello there Snorlax." Snorlax then slid onto his back and lay down. The sorcerer was still attached to his belly and ended up sitting atop him. "Going to sleep. Well, remember my name well. I am Akuji Kurokami." Snorlax closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Akuji's paw. The beast had awoken, it seemed. He had just missed it but managed to find him not so far, eating a grade 2 cursed spirit with ease. The being had used cursed energy so fluidly that it even beat his refined levels of cursed energy flow. Then, the air changed. It turned around and stared directly at him. The sorcerer noticed it was curious, and tried his luck. Best be prepared to run. He held out a hand and waved. The beast cocked its head as best it could, if it even had a neck, and lumbered towards him. Just before a couple of more steps would crush the sorcerer, it stopped. It placed a hand on its chest. "Snorlax." The sorcerer's heart raced rapidly. "It's capable of speech." It must be due to his level of cursed energy. So you are capable of speech, how wonderful. Snorlax. The being flopped down with a booming thud. There must be a reason behind why he's only saying that. Is that your name? The Snorlax swayed back and forth, it seemed the sorcerer was right. I see. Snorlax then beckoned him closer and rubbed his belly. Oh, this cursed spirit kept getting stranger and stranger. Could it be part of his cursed technique? Or perhaps, a binding vow? Akuji stepped forward and placed a hand on Snorlax's belly. How soft. He crept forward further and gave the Snorlax a hug. Snorlax. The tone of his voice had changed. Marvelous, what on earth is this being? He couldn't stop the chuckle from leaving his mouth. Yes, hello there Snorlax. The ground buckled and Akuji held on for dear life as the Snorlax leant backwards and collapsed on the ground. Akuji pushed up on the belly, positioning himself upright. He noticed the Snorlax was looking quite content. Going to sleep. Well, remember my name well. I am Akuji Korakami. Snorlax closed his eyes languidly and drifted off to sleep. Akuji allowed a grin to spread across his face. I wonder what this being is capable of. He leapt off the belly and noticed a small, practically non-existent curse sliding towards the sleeping giant. Could it be? Is his curse technique to gather other curses? Akuji pondered for a second. This requires further research. Incredible, Akuji muttered in awe. Years of research had led him to a new formulation of cursed energy. It remained negative, yet swelled uncontrollably. Rather than adhering to the flow, once one channeled the mysterious energy it rose upwards. The energy was limited in the sense that it disappeared quickly and seemed unstable. Further experiments on grade 4 curses showed it was a lethal mutation. Common traits showed bulbous bumps and swellings. However, some curses that had higher energy outputs would grow larger before bursting and their cursed energy seemed to briefly flare up, many times stronger than before. The basis of this idea came when Akuji noticed the Snorlax let off a small, nearly negligible amount of the energy. It was this amount that gathered the curses and therefore was likely not a technique, but a mutation the curse had gone through. At the time, the definition and word radiation wasn't yet known. Humans were not nearly as advanced to know of it and therefore Akuji kept experimenting, not knowing of the side effects. More years passed and Akuji found that higher grade curses could retain a little amount without bursting into pieces, however the energy would disappear after a couple minutes. As the source, he didn't want to test it on Snorlax, there might be no other that generates this energy. Unbeknownst to Akuji, he was developing skin cancer from the sheer amount of experiments he was doing. More years passed without Snorlax waking. Akuji had to find another body as his was currently dying. He had noticed the skin cancer and its effects but refused to stop experimenting. On that day one of the villagers of the nearby settlement went missing, never to be seen again. Snorlax still slumbered, but in his slumber he noticed the unstable energy. It looked quite tasty. Snorlax awoke, not because he was hungry though. He noticed a familiar, yet foreign energy. And a lot of it. Looking around he saw a stranger, his defensive mode activated until he noticed their familiar cursed energy. Checking closely Snorlax rolled closer before stopping right in front of their face and staring directly into the stranger's eyes. He noticed those familiar stitches and relaxed, cutting off his cursed energy flow and smiling. Snorlax, hello again. Snorlax didn't care anymore, he rolled away and squashed multiple cursed spirits in his rampage before eating the rest. It was only grade 4 curses though, he hadn't been asleep long enough to gather any higher grade curses. Akuji had killed all the nearby ones. Snorlax sat back up and waddled towards Akuji once more. He licked Akuji's entire front with one swoop and took away all the unstable energy. Slurping, he licked his lips and perched, scanning for any nearby curses. Akuji noticed this and brought out a small wooden ball that was hollow inside. Snorlax, try this. With that he threw the ball onto the ground beside Snorlax and it exploded. The dust settled revealing a small thinly curse with a human face, their limbs wrapped unnaturally around the body and it moved like a worm. Long black hair covered it from head to waist. It was a grade 2 curse. This is a cursed tool, it can carry a curse inside. A one-time use unfortunately. Snorlax looked down at the curse and picked it up, inspecting it. Its reserves looked very sweet, and so he shoved it straight down his throat without a word. Patting his belly, he burped loudly and looked at Akuji. I have no more. Snorlax. It's a one-time thing, no more. Snorlax pouted before lying back down sadly. After 10 minutes of doing nothing, Snorlax stood up once more. He wanted to find a new spot to sleep, preferably a path or bridge that people used a lot. It was an odd thought, but it felt natural. He didn't even know what a bridge was, and yet he yearned for one. He looked to a particularly hilly area of the forest and walked in that direction. Akuji followed close behind and watched as Snorlax effortlessly grabbed curses from holes in the ground to very tall trees with ease. However, the two came across a path in the middle of the forest that was used often. Multiple footprints could be seen going back and forth, until they were squashed under the weight of Snorlax as he lay down for a quick nap. Akuji watched in exasperation as Snorlax slept without a care in the world. While Akuji waited, he pondered how the Snorlax had figured out his identity after the body swap. The similar stitching could be a clue, but he assumed that it would have eaten him before even noticing them if he could. Maybe it's to do with my technique. Does it leave behind a residue or familiar feel? I could just be underestimating Snorlax's intelligence, though. It clearly understands what I am saying. Snorlax was truly a complex being. After a week of sleeping on the path, Snorlax was awoken by Akuji. Akuji had fashioned a long thin flute made of bone. After playing it and pushing cursed energy through it, Snorlax woke up due to the sound. Interesting. Even earthquakes hadn't woken Snorlax, yet a little flute did. Considering Snorlax's unusual interaction with cursed energy, it must be due to that. However, a side effect was that Snorlax seemed quite angry, at least until he noticed Akuji standing there. After looking around cautiously, Snorlax rose once more and kept heading up to the hilly part of the forest. Once the sky was filled with clouds, the Snorlax found a large cave which he waddled into. Inside the cave was a somewhat large cursed energy signature, and upon further inspection he found the curse. In the dark it was hard to see, but the curse was in the shape of a large crimson bear with sharp talons and a particularly rugged look. It refused to share its cave as it lunged at Snorlax, swiping at his belly. It was not very effective. Snorlax calmly grabbed the head of the bear, cursed energy swirling as he crushed it between his hands and ate the remains loudly. Akuji remained outside the cave and merely heard the sounds of ripping and chomping echo throughout the cave. Rain fell as he walked inside to see Snorlax asleep once again. Does Snorlax even have a cursed technique? Or are even grade 2 curses unworthy of its use? Akuji wanted to leave, but couldn't due to the rain. It was a long night. Snorlax had a dream that tasty yet unstable cursed energy plagued him. As he ate and ate and ate, he felt changes happening throughout his body until it suddenly stopped. In front of him were 3 berries. The first berry was yellow with orange spots on. It was shaped like a turnip, but with an extra bump atop it where a green leaf-like cap sprouted. Upon eating it, Snorlax felt as though his health was energized. The second berry was small and spherical in shape with a sweet taste and hard shell. It also had green straw-like caps coming from its top. The third berry was a small reddish-pink color and shaped like a pear. After eating it, Snorlax's defense felt stronger for about 5 minutes before disappearing. It tasted soft and bitter at first, but after leaving it in his mouth for a while it became sweet. After those little tastes, Snorlax's conscience drifted back to a dreamless sleep. From an outside view, Snorlax just brushed his arms against the floor, back and forth before stopping and sliding his head even further down to the floor. Akuji's paw. Akuji returned to the cave. It was somewhat harder to experiment since it was very dark in there, making him bring a flaming torch. Did he move? Snorlax slept long and well, and when he woke up he was alone. Akuji was nowhere to be seen, not even a single residue left. It seemed he hadn't been around in a long time. A large collection of charred wooden rods piled up in a corner of the cave, but Snorlax ignored this. Looking up at the ceiling lay hundreds of small bats. They weren't normal bats though, they were curses. Shaped like a bat but with differing sizes and deformities, they all had large red eyes and sharp angular teeth. Snorlax didn't reach up for them. He opened his mouth and inhaled. The pure force pulled them in droves, not a single one escaped. However, a single large white one was stood on the floor. Its pale skin shined in the cave and it had deep red eyes. It was slightly humanoid with large thin wings that shouldn't possibly be capable of flight and bony ends shaped like clubs. Snorlax reached forward and ripped off a wing with one pull. This made it wake up and screech, trying to escape. But as it turned towards the exit, Snorlax was already there. His mouth clamped down and his arms eased the curse in slowly. Quite delectable. Snorlax saw a couple of stragglers and swiftly dealt with them before heading deep into the cave and falling asleep once more. The sound of a flute woke Snorlax early. Bathing in the light of the sun stood Akuji's familiar cursed energy. Snorlax slowly walked towards him. Snorlax, you wouldn't mind if I borrowed your power, would you? Snorlax. Snorlax sat down. We have a rebellion to see through. Snorlax. Akuji wore a leather armor that wrapped around his body and fastened under his right arm. He had small shoulder guards and a ribbed bull helmet. Across his face was a light face mask, covering his lower half. Snorlax followed because he was promised a feast. They traversed for weeks. Along the way Snorlax took many rests and was dragged for a lot of it. However, he also deterred any curses from attacking. They had made it to the battlefield in time. The rebels planned to take down the opposing army and surround the palace where Togashi Masachika lived. It should be noted that at the front of both sides there were more people with higher cursed energy than the middle or back lines. As Snorlax lumbered onto the battlefield, Akuji had already pointed at the enemies and said to eat as many as he wants. Akuji made his own way to the front of the side he was aiding and talked to their own leader when a massive boom hit the left side of the enemy's ranks. Meanwhile Snorlax had been eating soldiers one by one, without a worry in the world. Until one actually saw him. He was about to scream, so Snorlax stomped on the ground with all his might multiple times, causing the dust to billow in the air. Catching multiple soldiers that rose into the air with his mouth, he lay down onto the army that was starting to run away in fear, flattening multiple enemies. Then he rolled. Underneath him was squashed soldiers as he rolled throughout the ranks. By now the army and Akuji had began their attack. This meant that the enemy sorcerers couldn't turn around and attack Snorlax. They had an entire army to fight. And so Snorlax rolled. Occasionally grabbing a soldier and plopping it in his mouth, he crushed all within his reach. Snorlax, he rumbled. The enemy's entire army collapsed due to the unseen threat, allowing the allies to easily press onward. After 5 minutes Snorlax felt that the reward was no longer enough and fell into a deep sleep. Little would he know that he would get praised as an agent of God sent down to support their holy rebellion. It's not like he cares, he was fast asleep. Akuji's paw. After he had left Snorlax to his own devices, he ran up to the generals and leaders of the rebellion, Rengo, Renko and Rensei. Rengo noticed him approaching first. Fujiwara, I was assuming you wouldn't be showing up. The others turned to Rakuji, known to them as Fujiwara. Rensei looked down on Fujiwara. Tisk. I can't believe you've chosen to source him of all people. Renko placed a hand in front of Fujiwara. Nevertheless, you must have brought quite the ally to show up so late. Fujiwara remained calm. Of course, I would only bring the best for you all. After all, once we win this battle I will gain an entire pardon, which, to me, is such a good reward. I couldn't possibly pass it up. A huge surge of cursed energy flared within the ranks of the enemy, causing the three to instinctively prepare for battle. Fujiwara remained calm. No need to worry, that is what I brought to help us. He turned around and looked at the plumes of dust rising in the distance. I do say, we should probably attack while they're distracted, no? The three leaders looked at Fujiwara smirking. Attack. The army ran forward to combat the enemy. Fujiwara ran past them, Naginata polearm in hand as he jabbed a distracted sorcerer looking back at the massive Snorlax. The other sorcerers gritted their teeth and had to look away. Their opponent was in front and behind. Both equally powerful. Their army mobilized and attacked. 5 sorcerers ran back to deal with the curse. Fujiwara activated his curse technique, dampening his presence as he dashed through the army, slashing at soldiers as he leapt over and between them. He caught up to one retreating sorcerer and threw his infused Naginata, piercing him in the heart before jumping up and off an unaware soldier's head, flying above the corpse and grabbing the Naginata once more. The naginata ripped out of the corpse as another sorcerer turned around to see Fujiwara's blade plunge right into his heart. 2 down. After looking up he noticed that of the 3 remaining, 2 had stopped running and barked orders for the soldiers to part. Now he stood facing a somewhat large clearing and his opponents. It was a 2 versus 1. Fujiwara stood there, naginata in hand and stared at the opposing 2 sorcerers. My cursed technique is called Silent Presence. It dampens people's ability to notice me. As soon as they heard him say, cursed technique, they ran forward in synchronization. Silent Presence. Due to his cursed technique, Fujiwara appeared blurry to the left one as he focused it solely on them. The other remained vigilant and swung down with his tachi sword, but Fujiwara simply sidestepped while spinning his naginata and slamming the wooden end into the disoriented opponent who had completely missed his own swing with his katana. The one with the tachi swung upwards once again, but Fujiwara had brought his own naginata back down as they collided. Silent Presence plus reversal equals emanating presence. Katana man on the floor who was getting back up buckled for a second as an imposing aura flooded his senses. Tachi man's strength slipped for a second and Fujiwara sliced open his left cheek and jumped up, kneeing him in the face. The katana swished behind him as his jump avoided it, and after kneeing the Tachi man in the face he swiveled and plunged his naginata down onto the Tachi man's face. But it was stopped as the Tachi man dropped his tachi and stopped the strike with his bare hands. He fell down and screamed as it pierced his palm. The katana man aimed to slash Fujiwara once more, but it only embedded into his shoulder plate, just barely touching flesh. At the same time Fujiwara felt the resistance and let go of his naginata, lowering down to grab the tachi while simultaneously grabbing the katana man's left arm. His fingers gripped the tachi's handle as he pulled himself towards the katana man, aiming to embed the tachi into his heart. He was about to plunge the sword when his shoulder reacted in extreme pain as his wound opened further. The tachi fell down and only pierced the man's ribs as he saw the katana falling towards him once more. Fujiwara jumped back to avoid the blade. Reversed cursed technique. He looked at his shoulder patching itself right up and saw the wound was far bigger than what a katana could do. It's his cursed technique. A double impact. Or a triggered impact that can be detonated. The tachi man stood up and ripped the naginata out of his hand, howling in pain. Now Fujiwara faced 2 wounded opponents, but didn't have a weapon. The katana user would die soon. He wasn't using the reversed cursed technique and the other had lost the use of a hand. In the distance he could see the final sorcerer closing in on Snorlax, who had conveniently rolled the opposite direction to them. Looking around, there were no nearby dropped weapons or just weapons in general, so Fujiwara took a defensive stance and waited for them to charge. The 2 ran at him and the tachi user had taken his tachi back. The tachi user's cursed energy flared for a second and he dashed forward. Fujiwara sidestepped and tried to punch the katana man only for the tachi user to disappear into a gray mist and reappear slashing down at his outstretched hand. Pushing his cursed energy forcibly he swiveled and the skin of his hand was slashed straight off, but his momentum kept pushing him around as he kicked the tachi man in the chest. The cursed energy followed just a second after, catching the user off guard as he was flung backwards. Divergent foot. The katana slashed down and ripped through the middle of Fujiwara's wounded arm, but not severing it. Reversed cursed technique. He bit down and rushed past the katana user, towards the tachi user and his discarded naginata. The tachi user tried to intercept him with a burst using his own cursed energy as a launcher but swung too high. Fujiwara slid underneath the attack and grabbed his naginata before bringing it up to intercept the falling katana. I have to end this quickly. He twisted his grip, causing the naginata to spin and slashing the katana man's grip. They let go of their katana and Fujiwara rose while twirling and bringing the naginata down on his neck. It embedded deeply and made the katana user slump. He was dead, but the naginata was stuck in his neck. The tachi user had recovered and ran forward, trying to take him down. Silent Presence. He was thrown off, allowing Fujiwara to let go and move past the blade. Grabbing the opponent's back with his arms he kneed him in the stomach. Divergent knee. The first hit winded the user. And the following hit with cursed energy piled up, making him drop his blade. Fujiwara threw him to the floor, grabbed the discarded tachi and brought it down. The attack was so powerful that the tachi shattered on impact. Panting, Fujiwara looked up at the sky, drenched in sweat. Kneeling down, he used both his hands and pulled against his leg to take the naginata back. Then he looked up at Snorlax, who was still going strong but noticeably slower than before. He's getting tired. To be fair, asking Snorlax to swing around so much mass for so long is already pushing it. Fujiwara took a deep breath and ran towards him. The final sorcerer was not going in, but waiting. He had noticed Snorlax getting tired and decided to only attack once he was severely weakened. Hold on. Fujiwara kept running, and then he noticed Snorlax getting ready to go to sleep. His face scrunched up and he discarded his heavy helmet before pouring more energy into his legs, bounding forward. Snorlax had fallen asleep and the sorcerer crept forward as Fujiwara was still 5 steps behind. Emanating presence. The sorcerer jolted and turned around as Fujiwara burst forward. He held up his tachi to block and was met with the sharpened point of the naginata. Fujiwara slammed his feet into the ground to slow down and pushed more cursed energy into the naginata. The sorcerer slid back and bounced off Snorlax's belly, causing him to lower his arms to absorb the impact. He rebounded right back towards Fujiwara, who moved his naginata to a higher angle and it went right through his neck. Fujiwara dropped the naginata with a thud and clatter as the body followed suit. He walked over to Snorlax and rested against him while looking at the battlefield. I better get a full pardon after this. There were not many enemies left and no sorcerers on their side still alive. He watched as the army circled the palace and waited outside. The generals went in and didn't come out for 10 minutes before dragging out Togashi Masachika's head and impaling it on a spear. Cries of relief and joy rose up in the distance. Snorlax remained asleep. Snorlax awoke to Akuji's flute once more. Blinking and rubbing his eyes, he sat up and looked around. Seeing Akuji in front of him made him remember that he needed a new home. And so he stood up and walked off, not knowing that he was recorded as a large divine presence that helped free the peasants from tyranny. He wandered. For multiple days he walked, leaving Akuji behind and continuing along on an instinctive path. He found many curses. One in particular was quite annoying. It had an incomplete domain that made the ground become a desert. Due to this it was incredibly hot and Snorlax spent 5 minutes finding the culprit before speedblitzing it and swallowing it whole. At some point he ended up at the beach and looked out at the calm ocean. He also noticed a small red octopus curse that sat down next to him. It smelled delicious, and even tasted sweet too. He moved on again, not sleeping but wandering. Snorlax had gone weeks without sleeping at this point. He wanted a great spot yet couldn't find one. 6 days later he came across a forest and inside it was a large clearing set with a pond and wide open space. Sitting down against a large tree he closed his eyes and felt the sun on him. He slept. And he did so for a long time. Upon waking he saw a large 3-tailed white fox laying by him. He tried to touch it but it scampered back. Snorlax. He smiled widely and waved at it. The fox slowly moved closer and sat by the Snorlax once more. Its cursed energy reserves was quite high and looking around the Snorlax saw no other spirits. Therefore it concluded that the fox had eaten all of his prey. He couldn't stand for that and so he patted the fox before enclosing his fist and shoving it into his mouth, biting of its front half, burping, and then eating the rest. After that was done he stood up and moved once more, further inland. Looking around he noticed that humans were quite more advanced than what he last saw. After walking for 12 days he found a nice creek and lay down beside it, falling asleep once more. He woke up. This nap was a lot longer than the others. His longest nap yet. Upon waking up he noticed his left foot was covered in moss and after peeling it off it dissolved into black ash and drifted upwards before dissolving entirely. Snorlax didn't think much of it though. He was covered in all sorts of creatures and got to work. He ate for 3 hours straight. That's how many cursed spirits had appeared, and just as he was finishing up he saw an late middle-aged man appear. His face was chiseled and sharp with short black hair atop his head and a small mustache above his mouth. Across his head were stitches. He smiled widely. You're not very hard to find, Snorlax. It was Akuji. They had reunited at long last. Snorlax. He bounded closer and patted Akuji's head. Yes, all right. Hello to you too. He sat down and pulled out a crude sack. This body goes by the name Noritoshi Kamo. Snorlax. No, you don't need to remember that name. Get this, I've been getting called Kenjaku recently. It's a name for not my body but my soul. My being is labeled as it now, so be sure to remember that name. Snorlax nodded. Ah, I got sidetracked. Anyways, the point is that we're like family, right? We've lived for hundreds of years and still remain together even if we have our time apart. Snorlax nodded and scratched his bum. Considering that I wanted to show you the fruits of our relationship. Using the research on cursed spirits that you helped me, I managed to create this. He opened his sack and showed 9 small cylinders. Inside these cursed tools are what I've called the death womb paintings. His face contorted and showed disappointment. However, these are all failures. In order for my true plan, it seems I will have to create a perfected version. Snorlax didn't entirely understand Kenjaku's meaning and instead decided to just view them as his siblings. He didn't know what parents were, so the closest thing to him that you could describe them as would be siblings. When Kenjaku showed his distaste for them, Snorlax was already too far gone. He was confused on why he had been so happy earlier in comparison. Snorlax couldn't properly understand humans and their emotions, so didn't realize that Kenjaku was only happy that the experiment had worked, not that they existed as themselves. With that, Kenjaku stood up and looked away. Well, I must go. I've been found out and need to change bodies. I'll come back for you, Snorlax. Don't fret. While he was looking away, Snorlax pressed closer to the death womb paintings and imparted his own little amount of the unstable cursed energy onto them. He felt good for helping them. After that, he watched Kenjaku walk away and followed before parting as he saw a nice-looking clearing to sleep in. Looking back on it, Snorlax truly had no idea how long he had existed. Most of his time was spent sleeping and sitting with Kenjaku. In a way, Kenjaku was his friend and trainer. He had helped Snorlax and stuck by him all this time. Always returning, he had become a comforting presence, so much so that Snorlax had truly been devoured by his need for sleep, allowing him to sleep for decades at a time. Of course, Snorlax didn't notice. He was fueled by cursed energy, and committing morally wrong acts was second nature. He was simply born that way. Even if influenced by Kenjaku, Snorlax was ultimately a cursed spirit with a capacity to learn and understand. Snorlax wanted to learn and understand more, which is why he was so fascinated with the human Kenjaku in the first place. However, what Snorlax didn't realize was that this curiosity was merely laying dormant, buried beneath layers that had unknowingly built up in his own gluttonous cycle of eating and sleeping. Snorlax slept soundly, though. He didn't think much about anything. After all, it was how he'd survived until now. Upon awaking, Snorlax once again found many cursed spirits. It was routine at this point. What he didn't expect was for Jujutsu sorcerers to find him. He was sitting down in the clearing when 2 sorcerers appeared. They had relatively low levels of cursed energy. Due to this, Snorlax couldn't be bothered to eat them and just watched. Here it is. This is the cursed spirit, right? A short man with black hair asked. Their companion, a tall woman with long brown hair, slapped the back of his head. Don't ask stupid questions. Ow. She turned back to Snorlax. Now let's exorcise this fatty. Snorlax was a little taken back. He thought he had heard exorcise, but was lucky. The woman ran forward, jumped and punched Snorlax in the belly. It wasn't the best idea. Snorlax's belly rippled and repelled the woman high into the air. As in, really high. She screamed in her way down and landed with a loud crunch. She died instantly. Meanwhile, Snorlax just scratched his head in confusion. The other man was enraged. Shadow bind. The shadows beneath him shot out and entangled Snorlax, making him feel uncomfortable. This annoyed Snorlax severely, and so he simply burst free of the binding. The sorcerer went slack with shock, turned around and ran. He didn't even pick up his friend, he just ran. So Snorlax picked her up for him and ate. It wasn't very tasty. She was quite bitter, in fact. A couple days later, when Snorlax was rolling around, another sorcerer came. This one had a much higher level of cursed energy than the others. Snorlax felt their presence but didn't even manage to look at them before hearing, "This is above my pay grade," and feeling their cursed energy signature disappear. Jujutsu High Pav. What on earth is this? A curse that has appeared. With this report, we can definitely assume that it's above a grade 1. Potentially special grade. Special grade. Potentially. But it seems passive, it hasn't actually attacked anyone yet. But someone died. No. Well yes, but it was only because they attacked it and happened to just bounce off. Is Yuki Tsukumo available? No sir, she's overseas. The boss clearly got annoyed at this as his chair's armrest snapped in two. Then send those first years in Tokyo. If it truly is passive then maybe he can use it. Okay sir. Suguru Geto's pav. Hey Satoru, don't act so annoyed. Blurg. These higher-ups are annoying me. Sending us on a random mission when I have things to do. Oh yeah. Like what? Ellipsis. Reading Shonen Jump. Relax Satoru, it's a special grade cursed spirit most likely. It will be quite the addition to my cursed technique. Tisk. Of course it's gotta be in the middle of nowhere as well. Satoru suddenly stopped. It's over there. His glasses slid down as he looked to an open clearing. He put his hands in his pockets. Well, let's get this over with. I wanna buy some sweets while we still have time. Geto followed behind and upon seeing the beast he paused. Satoru didn't. He barked a laugh. This is a special grade. He could get defeated by a diet. Biwahahaha. When the spirit cursed around and looked at him, the atmosphere dropped and Geto stood ahead. Summoning the rainbow dragon, he prepared to fight. But Satoru had other plans. Hey Geto, you think if he didn't have that cursed energy presence he'd be kinda cute? Snorlax cocked his head and stood up. Satoru looked quite tasty. Geto watched and realized that the spirit wasn't attacking. Hello. Snorlax turned to Geto. Snorlax. Satoru giggled. Hey Geto, isn't he a Pokemon? Geto paused. Actually, he is. So catch him already. Shut it Satoru. Geto looked back at the Snorlax. Well then, want to join me, Snorlax? Snorlax's paw. Snorlax was rolling around when the two sorcerers appeared. The one with white hair, Satoru, was odd. His eyes looked very yummy. The other, Geto, seemed oddly familiar. He kind of made Snorlax feel like he was at peace. So when he heard Geto ask him to join him, his immediate thought was to agree. But Snorlax isn't stupid, he knew something was off about this whole thing. What he wasn't was a hard thinker, so he immediately brushed this aside and walked up to Geto before lying on his belly in front of him. I think he said yes. Satoru drawled. Meanwhile Geto was contemplating the weirdness of this cursed spirit. He then decided to use his technique. Cursed spirit manipulation. Light around Snorlax swirled and he transformed into a red and white ball. Geto realized something was definitely different about this and ate the ball anyway. It didn't taste like a rag, it actually tasted sweet. Wow, well that was easy. Satoru slapped Geto on the back. Come on, bring him out. Bring him out. Geto complied and Snorlax materialized in front of him. Snorlax immediately clamped his mouth around Satoru's head. Whoa, no eating Satoru. Snorlax's eyes glanced at Geto then back at Satoru who was flailing inside. He opened his mouth and released Satoru. Gah. Geto, what the hell man? It's not my fault, probably something to do with your eyes. Satoru looked up at Snorlax. HMPH. Now you're gonna pay. Wait Satoru. 5 minutes later Satoru ended up sitting on Snorlax's shoulders as they waddled away. After a certain point Geto stopped. Satoru, you did put up a veil right? Ellipsis. How about instead of focusing on the negatives? Geto just sighed. At least we were in a secluded area and didn't make any noise. But let's never forget that again. Satoru pumped his fist into the air. Yeah, now come on Snorlax, put the jets on. Snorlax didn't comply. Ah, it seems that Snorlax is going to be quite busy from now on. While Snorlax was not summoned he was in a black void, all alone. At times he could feel Geto's emotions if they rose much, but that barely happened at all. And so he slept. Satoru's paw. On the way back to Tokyo Satoru pondered the thought of a Pokemon being a cursed spirit. Hey Geto, you think that the creator of Pokemon is actually a sorcerer who has seen Snorlax before? Geto tapped his chin. It's more likely that an ancestor saw it, then. Again, considering his size and shape it shouldn't be too hard to find evidence of him existing in records. True. The car stopped and Satoru got out stretching. Geto, I'm feeling kind of tired. Can you get Snorlax to carry me? I'm sure Snorlax is more tired than you. Satoru gasped and clung to Geto. Doing puppy eyes he looked at Geto. Geto closed his eyes and sighed. Yuppie. Snorlax appeared and clamped him mouth down on Satoru once more. Aha. You can't eat me anymore, you feel that? Satoru had activated Infinity. To Geto, who was outside, Satoru's voice was muffled and yet he could still tell that he was gloating. Snorlax, let go. Snorlax gave Geto a side eye and threw Satoru up with his jaw. Wee. Satoru fell through the air before landing on Snorlax's shoulder. Onwards. To Shoko. Snorlax looked up at the long staircase and grumbled. Take a look at a special grade cursed spirit, Shoko. Satoru was off Snorlax and shaking his hands at him while talking to Shoko. Snorlax noted that Shoko could use the reversed cursed technique and stayed still while looking at her. Geto noticed this and elbowed Snorlax. Say hi, she's a good person. Snorlax looked down at Geto, then back at Shoko and placed a hand over his heart. Snorlax. He couldn't bow, he's too fat. So he just nodded his head. PFF'd. Shoko looked away. Snorlax felt slighted. Meanwhile Satoru jumped at Snorlax and latched onto his belly. Soft and a radiator, ah, this truly is bliss. Satoru refused to let go, even when they went to report to Yaga. Yaga ended up hitting Satoru on the head. He doesn't look like a cursed spirit, more like a bigger version of my cursed corpses. Satoru was still slumped on the floor as Geto dismissed Snorlax. Snorlax was summoned again outside. Geto wanted to test him out. Snorlax, I choose you. Satoru hit a pose and Geto just watched. So did Snorlax. He had no idea what was going on, so tried to hit the same pose. Ellipsis. Let's test durability. Satoru wound up a punch and hit Snorlax right in the belly. All it did was ripple and Satoru was pushed back 10 meters. Geto stroked his non-existent beard. Maybe he's built like in the Pokemon games, we should probably. Maximum output. Stop. Geto threw a wet fish curse at Satoru, hitting him right in the face. Gah. Satoru collapsed. Meanwhile Snorlax walked over and ate the fish curse. What? Geto's mind was fried as he had just lost a curse. Satoru jumped up. My savior. He buried his face in Snorlax's warm belly. Snorlax. Meanwhile Shoko had rounded the corner, seen this and immediately walked away. Geto pointed at Satoru. Snorlax. Use pound. Boom. Snorlax bounded forward, slamming Satoru with his belly. Satoru slammed into a wall and groaned. The betrayal. Geto pulled out his phone and muttered. Snorlax. Moves, aha. Snorlax used tackle. Satoru was now getting back up. No. It was late at night when Snorlax was in the shadow place, stored in Geto's curse technique. Until suddenly he was summoned and he felt something foreign. He was inside of a domain. Am I pretty? Snorlax felt that this domain was slightly different from the one he had been in previously. Clipping blades appeared around Snorlax as he contemplated his own cursed energy. Snorlax pushed out his own cursed energy, forming a defense as he looked at the humanoid curse. The surrounding circle of cursed energy spluttered uncontrollably until he infused his own unstable type and forced it back into himself. Snorlax's chest glowed and changed. He enlarged, growing 4 times bigger than before as grass and trees sprouted on his belly. The other domain disappeared, revealing Geto. Hello there, I just wanted to see your reaction to a domain. He looked at the absolute unit in front of him. Snorlax suddenly shrunk back to normal as his unstable energy receded and 3 different berries hit the floor. Whoa. Geto was taken aback. Snorlax just felt tired as he sat down and fell asleep. Huh. Geto just looked at the berries. Satoru's paw. Geto had come to Satoru with 3 mysterious berries. Satoru's 6 eyes worked wonders as he looked at them. Well, they're definitely something. Unfortunately they're not devil fruits, but oh well. Get to the point, Satoru. Satoru stood up. Those 2 seem to heal, like the reversed curse technique, but also not. There's negative energy mixed in there. The third one will likely give a temporary boost to your cursed energy reinforcement, a defensive buff basically. While Geto contemplated, Gojo got bored. Twirling one in his hands, he asked Geto where they had come from. Snorlax. Cursed technique. I don't think so, it seemed to be an application of cursed energy. He also managed to negate a domain's sure hit for a second. Crude, yes, but it definitely worked. Oh, where is he now? Sleeping. Shouldn't we put him on a diet? Curses don't work like that, Satoru. I know, but it sounds funny, doesn't it? Sadly, Geto couldn't refute that claim. Whatever, Satoru, our first year is nearly up, so you'd better be preparing for your juniors. Satoru just knocked on his own head. PFF'd. It's fine, after all. We're the strongest. Geto closed the door behind him. Snorlax slept, he deserves it. For some reason Yaga allowed for Snorlax to be summoned during lessons. Geto and Satoru argued that he can understand human language and therefore should be allowed to learn. This led to Snorlax sitting in the back of the classroom. He did sleep a lot though. But once when he wasn't sleeping, he overheard something called a binding vow. Now many consider Snorlax to not be smart, but that's only because he's hardwired only for eating and sleeping. Historical evidence points to the idea of a Snorlax without this wiring. Apparently they were so powerful that they had to be nerfed, and this led to their entire bodies being changed so that all they did was eat and sleep. The sources are completely reliable, and so since Snorlax heard of a way that could potentially make his sleep even better, he figuratively jumped at the opportunity. In the end, Snorlax made a binding vow. In exchange for his brain having a 200% output while Snorlax was asleep, he would lose 25% of his brain's output while awake. Or in other words, Snorlax was a genius and could comprehend the existence of divinity while asleep, but couldn't calculate 10x0 while awake. Truly a exquisite binding vow that not even the binding vow merchant. Truly a binding vow that not even the king of curses could think of. Then came another lesson in which Snorlax could compute. He heard about barrier techniques. Of course, because he knew Kenjaku, he already had an understanding of barriers. In fact, when he was caught in a domain expansion, he accidentally used that knowledge to remove the sure hit effect for a second. This second was only created due to Snorlax locking in after realizing that if he died he could no longer eat. Snorlax had decided that he needed a counter to domain expansion, but he could think about that later. Right now what he needed was a nap. And with that, the first years left for their holidays as their first year ended. Whenever Geto summoned Snorlax throughout the holiday, he was asleep. This led to Geto using him as a bed because it was far more comfy. Geto also didn't move around in his sleep and wouldn't fall off. Most sorcerers couldn't move in their sleep due to their strict training and regimens. Aside from Satoru Gojo, of course. While Snorlax was asleep, his brain worked overtime, creating a dreamlike landscape where he could think. Similar to Toto's false memories, he could compute things even though it wasn't truly happening. Due to his binding vow, Snorlax accidentally managed to find a way to experiment with cursed energy independent of conscious thought. Unfortunately, because of this, his body wasn't learning domain expansion but accidentally went the wrong way and started developing domain amplification, or at least a similar technique. What he learned was how to wrap himself in a barrier and infuse his technique into it. Snorlax woke up and noted that he had this new technique, then promptly ignored it because he didn't need to use it. The time was now April and Geto summoned him. Snorlax. He wakes. Satoru shouted while Geto and Shoko just looked at him. Quiet down. Yaga barked. All three sat down immediately and looked to him. Welcome back, Snorlax. Yaga bowed. Satoru straightened up and looked like he had been personally attacked before Geto elbowed him. It was not worth it. Satoru continued anyways and ended up with a steaming bump on his head 1 minute later. Snorlax was sleeping as usual when he was summoned. Being summoned mid-air, he landed down on a worm-like curse with a large mouth. It had been trying to attack a sorcerer that Snorlax had never seen before. She wore a priestess outfit and was getting very annoyed by the Tokyo group minus Shoko. Snorlax patted her on the head. Hey, she barked before turning around to see Snorlax. Snorlax. He grumbled half-heartedly. Was this truly all he was summoned for? It did seem that she felt bad though, so Snorlax didn't care much. Satoru called out from above the crater Snorlax was stuck in. Don't shout at Snorlax. He's strong. Satoru then looked at Utahime with a not-so-flattering stare. I don't like what you're insinuating there. Snorlax looked up at the clear sky. Wait, clear sky? Where's the veil? Yes, that's right. Even Snorlax at a single glance had realized that the 3 Tokyo students hadn't put up a veil. Geto was in the middle of absorbing the curse that Snorlax sat on when Mei Mei brought it up. Snorlax was summoned once again a couple hours later. In the room was Yaga, Satoru and Geto. "Okay Snorlax, nice to see you're awake. Make sure to keep these two in line during this mission." Snorlax. Snorlax was helpless. Why was a curse, a being made to eat humans, having to look after two of them? Once Snorlax was next summoned, he was by a pool and Satoru had just gotten off the phone. He could tell Satoru was going to say something without thinking properly and placed a hand on his shoulder. Geto watched in silence. Satoru embedded his face in Snorlax's belly. "You're so right Snorlax, you're so right." Snorlax nodded as if he knew what was going on and looked at Geto, who nodded approvingly. They walked around a small building's corner where a maid was waiting. "Meet Snorlax, our mascot." Snorlax had no idea what this mascot was and so nodded in understanding and then looked at Geto, who nodded approvingly. "Suguru." Satoru scratched his neck. "How are the surveillance spirits?" "Right." Geto placed a hand to his head. "I wish I could see their vision like May. But if something happens they'll immediately let me." His eyes shifted and he tapped Satoru on the chest. "Satoru, we have to get to Riko now." Snorlax disappeared into Geto's storage and immediately took the opportunity to nap. It was now truly beginning. Snorlax's conquest of the Jujutsu Kaisen verse will only end in one way. With Snorlax sitting atop the buried grave of Sukuna, the ex-king of curses. Snorlax was summoned rather quickly. He found himself on a beach with Geto, Satoru the maid and some random teenage girl. Thinking back to Yaga telling him to look after the 2 second years, he decided to stay vigilant. This lasted a good 2 minutes before he walked over to Geto and lay on the sand. All in a day's work. Snorlax was next summoned in Jujutsu High's gates. Satoru had a hole in his chest and Geto had used another cursed spirit to subdue the attacker. Snorlax placed his yellow berry into Satoru's mouth instantly. He had taken them back since Geto didn't want to eat it. Gah! Satoru ate it anyway and watched as the wound closed. Oh! Geto's other curse was chopped into pieces as Toji Fushiguro stood, covered in purple blood. Satoru stepped forward. "I'll take care of this." And with that Snorlax was dismissed, fading back into the depths of Geto's curse technique. Perhaps bolstered by Geto's own feelings, Snorlax felt worried. Worried enough to not fall asleep but wait for his next summon. He was resummoned in the tombs of the Star Corridor. Geto and Amani walked off. Snorlax had to protect the maid and wait for Satoru. In Geto's words, "Stay and protect her. When Gojo arrives, point him down the way." If Snorlax didn't know any better, he might have thought that the two students had schemed to not sacrifice the star plasma vessel to Tengen. After a little bit the elevator dinged and out stepped Toji Fushiguro. A cursed spirit, huh? He couldn't see the maid behind Snorlax, probably heard her though. Considering the speed Snorlax had seen before and his orders, Snorlax remained still and held out his arms protectively. "Huh, not going to attack me? Well, I wouldn't want to have to alert Tengen by bringing out a cursed tool, so I'll leave you two for now." He calmly walked away and Snorlax watched him disappear. The one goal of protecting the maid filled his being. He would complete his order till Geto called him. After some time he noticed Toji walk back the way he came, with Amani's corpse in hand. Toji gave Snorlax one look before continuing on. As soon as he had left, Snorlax looked at the crying maid and then back to where Geto should be. He knew he wasn't dead and decided to console the maid as best he could, holding her and allowing her to cry into his belly. After some time he saw Geto walking by and was instantly back in the curse energy storage. In there he felt a crushing sadness. Geto had seen better days. Snorlax ended up lying on his back, yet for the first time he couldn't sleep. From that day on Snorlax was barely summoned anymore. Everything changed. Satoru had grown to new heights and focused solely on becoming stronger. His previous laid-back attitude was barely there anymore. Geto fell into a pit of hatred, disgust and anger. It wasn't helpful that he didn't talk to his friends as much. The trio slowly began falling apart. Shoko started smoking again and rarely went out on missions. Even on missions when Satoru and Geto went together they didn't talk as much. The mood was very somber. And then Satoru started getting solo missions and even Geto did. They talked to their juniors, but it was more of a bother to Geto, who was wallowing in shame. Perhaps that was what it meant to be human. This negative emotion led to Snorlax also taking strides in his strength. He slept practically all the time, and when used in combat he was just an immovable object that could take a huge hit without even waking up. Time flew by for Snorlax. All he wanted was for the warmth to return, but it never did. They had changed Snorlax, and now he was left alone. A year had passed. Satoru was now the strongest. He was the only one who acted similar to what he used to with Snorlax. Most of the reason he was even summoned was because Satoru asked for it. And yet even with the 6 eyes, he remained blind. Geto only worsened with time until a fateful day when he met the other special grade, Yuki Tsukumo. Snorlax was there as they talked. She seemed earnest and made Geto's mood lift. He didn't understand what was going on, but it was enough to make him put her in his good books. About a month later, Geto summoned Snorlax in a small room which had a cage in it with 2 small children inside. Snorlax, look after those 2. Geto walked out of the room and reappeared 30 minutes later looking a little disheveled. Snorlax did note the blood on Geto's foot, and after leaving while carrying the 2 girls and making sure they couldn't see, he saw everything. It was a massacre. And unlike all those years ago when he participated in a rebellion, Snorlax felt bad for the corpses. Knowing Geto, he assumed that they were bad, but it still left an awkward taste in his mouth. After that he noticed Geto seemed freer than before. Snorlax was on child protection duty and played with the 2 new kids all the time. After a little bit, Snorlax realized that he wasn't going back to Jujutsu High. Until one day when he was summoned in the middle of a crowded street. Looking down he saw Geto, who was walking away, but looking behind he saw a bewildered Satoru. Snorlax waved. Snorlax. He didn't understand what was going on. However, he did see the distraught look on Satoru's face before returning to Geto's storage. Snorlax was unsure of what it meant, and so he did what he did best. He fell asleep. From that moment forward, Geto focused on expanding his influence. He even went to Africa and sourced some friends there. Snorlax only came out to help with the kids or take down new spirits. The spirit that he had the most trouble with was a large pelican-like spirit who was slightly bigger than himself. Sadly, he couldn't ride him though. His mouth was how he carried people around, and Snorlax wouldn't fit or would just tear off its lower jaw through sheer weight. It was happier than before, but Snorlax missed Satoru quite a bit. He was certainly an interesting character, but at least he would sneak sweet foods into his mouth from time to time. The 2 adopted kids wouldn't dare anymore. After growing up, they never did anything Geto told them not to. Geto hadn't told them not to do it, but they assumed Snorlax would be like a pet and that you shouldn't feed them even if they look exceptionally cute at eating times. Snorlax had still yet to use his curse technique in a practical sense. He had used it before, but it wasn't particularly necessary for his current predicament of mainly sleeping. Recently, Geto had taken an interest in a special grade cursed spirit. He planned to take the curse from the person who was cursed, Yuta Okatsu. The curse was in fact Rika. Snorlax only got the part of visiting Tokyo and was just excited to see Satoru again. He remained unaware of the tension due to his non-human outlook. While he may understand mindlessly killing is bad, he didn't understand that just because Geto does something it doesn't mean that it's automatically a good thing to do. After Geto arrived in Tokyo, specifically Jujutsu High, he summoned Snorlax, who looked around. Snorlax recognized his surroundings and looked for Satoru but didn't see him. What he did see was 3 humans in the sorcerer outfits and a panda not so far away. Snorlax. He bounded forward, not seeing Geto's outstretched hand aiming to stop him. Of the 4, only Panda, Toge and Maki prepared for an attack, yet it never came. Snorlax burst forward way too fast for something of his size and patted them all on the head apart from Panda. Instead he nodded at Panda. Snorlax, he said solemnly. Before they could react, Geto also joined Snorlax and grabbed Yuta's hand. Nice to meet you, Okatsu. I'm Suguru Geto. Snorlax looked up and around as Geto got to know his new friends. Still no Gojo in sight. It's a paradox in which the strong must submit to the weak. It's deplorable. Geto seemed to be ranting about his beliefs now. Snorlax was used to this by now and unconsciously stopped paying attention. Still no Gojo. Now, don't be sprouting crazy talk to my students. It was Satoru. Snorlax moved incredibly fast, the students didn't even realize that he had gone until he was in front of Gojo. Snorlax. He tried to give a hug but infinity was in the way. Now's not the time, Snorlax. Then he let go and moved out the way so Geto and Satoru could talk. This reunion wasn't exactly going as Snorlax had expected. Step away from them, Suguru. For some reason, it seemed that the atmosphere was full of tension. I heard about the excellent first years. I see. So, they're under your care. A special grade cursed human. An abrupt mutation cursed corpse. A cursed speech user descendant. His tone turned mockingly. And the Zenin family failure. Snorlax was slightly confused now. First of all, why is everything so tense? Second of all, why did Geto just mock our new friend? And third of all, why is Satoru serious for once? Snorlax looked back and forth between the two. After Satoru teleported in front of Geto, tensions rose even higher until Geto announced his plans. On December 24th he would attack both Jujutsu high bases. As he was talking, however, Nanako interjected. Ah, Master Geto, the store's closing soon. Sorry Satoru, the girls want to go to the crepe shop on Takashita Street. I'll be on my way. Satoru stepped forward. Not on my watch. Suddenly multiple cursed spirits appeared everywhere. Don't try it. Geto didn't look back. Your precious students are all within my striking range. Well then everyone, see you on the battlefield. He turned back around and saw Snorlax still standing next to Yaga and the spot Satoru had teleported from. Snorlax, are you coming? Snorlax looked at Yaga, who was stone cold, then at Satoru, who was deadly quiet. It seemed that now was not the best time for a reunion. He could only hope that they didn't dislike him. Nodding at Geto, he disappeared back into the cursed technique without a sound. And with that, Geto left to buy some crepes. At the crepe place, Geto summoned Snorlax once more. Snorlax, I hope you know that, myself and Satoru are enemies right now. Snorlax shuffled uncomfortably, making sure to not squash anyone. Geto shut his eyes slightly. Even if you won't attack Satoru, I hope you'll at least protect me from him should he attack me. Snorlax seemed very down in the dumps but nodded anyway. Today was the first time he had heard about this plan to attack Jujutsu High, the place that once housed him for over a year. Maybe it was due to the fact that Geto barely summoned him now. Perhaps Geto might have even forgotten the true extent of Snorlax's smartness and cleverness. From Snorlax's point of view, his best friends were apparently at odds after years of being separated. Snorlax didn't know what to do, and so he ate. Snorlax. Those were our crepes. The day was December 24, 2017. Snorlax didn't take part in the attack. Geto had him remain in the storage the entire time. He could feel Geto's emotions. They changed and shifted frequently from surprise to glee and eventually to annoyed, but there was something else mixed in that Snorlax couldn't place. And then he was summoned. And what he saw was a huge hole where Geto's shoulder and arm should be. There you are. Snorlax dropped the two remaining berries in front of him, but Geto refused them. It doesn't matter, look behind you. Snorlax turned around and saw Satoru standing there. He parted and allowed the two to talk. Any last words? No matter what, I'll always hate those monkeys. But it's not like I hate everyone at Jujutsu High. It's just that in this world, I couldn't be truly happy from the bottom of my heart. Snorlax stood in silence. Suguru. Satoru looked down at the fallen Geto. Geto just exhaled and laughed. Slightly. You should at least curse me in the end. And then he died. Satoru looked up at Snorlax. What are you going to do now? Snorlax could feel the bond between himself and Geto disappearing and sat down, slumped. All right, I'll leave you here. With that, Satoru walked away. Before disappearing from Snorlax's sight, he called back. Remember that you're welcome at Jujutsu High. Ellipsis. Snorlax looked up but Satoru was gone. Snorlax. He sat there for many hours, all alone. After quite some time, Snorlax noticed a familiar cursed energy. Snorlax. He looked up and heard high heels clacking against the floor. Well, what are you doing here, Snorlax? From out the shadows came Kenjaku in the body of a woman. Did you do this? She looked at the body beside him. Snorlax only shook his head. Do you mind me using that body? Snorlax thought about it. If Kenjaku, his first friend, became Geto his second friend, then does that mean he still has all his friends? Snorlax didn't want to think too hard and decided to trust Kenjaku as he parted and allowed Kenjaku to do her thing. Alright then, let's get to it. It's all coming together. Snorlax fell asleep in the familiar presence of his longtime friend, Kenjaku. He was woken up by the same flute as always. It really brings back memories for Snorlax. But standing in front of him was Geto, or should I say Kenjaku. Let's go with Kenjaku. Well then Snorlax, how would you like to be the first curse I take in? Snorlax. He thinned out and transformed into a red and white ball that fell into Kenjaku's hand. Interesting. Shoving it down his throat, he expected a horrible taste and yet it wasn't. In fact, it tasted quite nice and refreshing. Do all spirits taste like this? He grinned and walked away. Hey, my master plan is coming together, but first. With that he disappeared into the darkness and began his preparations. Snorlax felt a little out of place seeing his old companions interact with Kenjaku. Even though it was in fact not Geto in control, everyone acted like he was still there. Or at least they tried. Kenjaku acted in character with Geto, but lots of this were off. Kenjaku's purpose was to retain contact with these people since they are quite valuable. It was hard to tell if they bought it or not. The two twins didn't. Kenjaku practically abandoned them and left them with the religious group Geto had created. But Snorlax was given a gift from Kenjaku. It was a small metal band that barely fit around his wrist. Inside was a familiar energy and Snorlax was only told to emulate it when Kenjaku asked. It seemed like fair terms to Snorlax, so he didn't think much of it. Snorlax practically followed Kenjaku everywhere until late 2017. He started to hang around 4 cursed spirits, a patch-faced one, a volcano one, and the 2 others who Snorlax swears to have eaten before. Maybe because he had eaten them before he wasn't allowed near them. Snorlax didn't particularly care. His cursed technique surprised even Kenjaku. In Kenjaku's words, it feels like a mashup of multiple different cursed techniques but also not whole, very weird. Snorlax hadn't shown him his domain expansion yet. He felt it wasn't refined enough and didn't want to disappoint him. It should be noted that Snorlax hadn't actually done his domain expansion yet, only in his sleeping state. Either way, Snorlax was rarely in the physical world and had been told to work on either a maximum technique or a domain expansion. Multiple years of trying due to his binding vow had paid off. Since he was asleep practically 24/7 for the past 10 months, his ability had improved considerably. Snorlax. Kenjaku had summoned him out of the blue. It is nearly time to see Satoru once more. Snorlax, figuratively, jumped with joy. Yes, in a couple of days we will take a huge step towards my final product. My master plan will take shape. Snorlax didn't particularly know what he meant but felt happy for him. After all, Kenjaku was his best friend. To Snorlax, when Kenjaku used Geto's body, it wasn't wrong. For him it was like having 2 friends merged together, the best of both worlds. If he didn't, then Snorlax would have never seen Geto again. Even Snorlax knew what death was, especially as a harbinger of despair. I should add something. You know of the 9 cursed womb death paintings, correct? Snorlax. Snorlax remembered them fondly. He had even given them a slight gift, and if he saw one they would surely recognize him as family. Well, 3 of them have incarnated and I created another similar thing. Sukuna's vessel, Yuji Itadori. Snorlax SC traked his backside while contemplating those words. He surmised that he had gained another little brother, although he hadn't met them yet and so had to be careful with what he did from now on to make sure he didn't accidentally get on his bad side. With that, Kenjaku dismissed Snorlax and grinned. And now, we head to Shibuya. Gate, open. Snorlax had just been summoned, and he stood behind Satoru in the middle of a train station. He scratched his bum. This was a weird place to meet up, wasn't it? Snorlax. Satoru turned around and gasped as he saw Snorlax. The prison realm behind attached to Satoru, binding him as Kenjaku walked out. From behind Snorlax. Yo, Satoru. Been a while. Who the hell are you? His eyes widened in rage. Snorlax, that's not Suguru. Correct. My technique allows me to switch bodies by swapping brains. I coveted this technique for these exact circumstances. Tisk. Snorlax, get away. You heard that, didn't you? Snorlax looked back and forth. You know what my technique is now, and I have known Snorlax far longer than you have. We are ancient beings, older than even the King of Curses himself. He sleeps a lot, of course. Snorlax, haven't you realized yet? This guy is clearly a bad guy. He stole Geto's body. He did this to me in front of your own eyes. Kenjaku smirked. Oh, coming from the same person who had a part in this body's death. I must thank you for that, of course. And you know who has already beaten up that body before then? Satoru smirked. Kenjaku's face creased in dissatisfaction. Yuta Okatsu, I don't really get what everyone else sees in him. His ability to copy cursed techniques, and his boundless cursed energy. Both are the result of him having to detain his loved one's soul. Sorry to say, but Yuta Okatsu cannot become the next Satoru Gojo. Good night then, Satoru Gojo. Let us meet again in the new world. Satoru grimaced. Remember what I said, Snorlax, at least look after my students when you can, and Suguru. How are you going to let yourself get used like that? Snorlax watched as Kenjaku's own hand tried to strangle him. He was deeply confused. Was he failing Geto by allowing Kenjaku to take his body? Well, this has never happened before. Gate. Close. Satoru was sealed and Snorlax was deeply disturbed. Is Kenjaku really a good person? Is Geto a good person? Is even Satoru a good person? What was he meant to do, kill one friend to make another happy? Was he meant to kill all his food? Food. They're his friends, not food. They're his friends. Friends. Snorlax's head split as he spiraled, all noise turned into a loud disturbing ring and his vision swam. Kenjaku was talking with the disaster curses and Choso when he noticed Choso look at Snorlax. This could be bad. He quickly stored Snorlax as the prison realm turned gray, the countless eyes turned blue and started crying as it became far too heavy. Kenjaku dropped it and it fell to the floor with a thud, cracking the ground. Mahito crouched down. What's his deal? It seems the prison realm needs time to process Satoru Gojo. Mahito turned, his arms stretching far as he destroyed a Mechamaru camera. Kenjaku grinned. We've been found out. Well, I'm staying here, what about you guys? The 4 disaster curses had gathered around the seal. However, Choso, as always, was on demon timing. To avenge my brothers, I will kill Yuji Itadori and Nobara Kugasaki, then I'll head to Jujutsu High to collect the rest of my brothers. Jago did not like this statement. I dunno who Kugasaki is, but Itadori is off limits. We're gonna turn him into Sukuna. I don't care. The two started to square off. Meanwhile, Snorlax was currently having a huge crisis. Not only had he been put through 15 different emotional challenges, just before disappearing he had felt the presence of a death womb painting. Kenjaku had withheld his own brothers from him. But wasn't Kenjaku his friend? His basic curse instincts arose. Kill, eat humans. Kill, 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 kill. Snorlax swelled with cursed energy and grew, even taller than before. He grew and grew and grew until even Kenjaku felt it pressing against his very technique. Forcefully suppressing Snorlax within his own technique, he knocked him out cold with a simple command, enhanced with cursed energy. Kenjaku's paw. He had sensed Snorlax pressing against the confines of his cursed technique. Curses. Why is he like this? A couple words from Satoru Gojo was all it took. He contemplated what to do for a while and decided. I can keep suppressing him with the technique, I'll continue until he's calmed down. Looking down at the prison realm, he grimaced. You just keep getting in the way, don't you, Satoru Gojo? Snorlax slumbered, and yet he remained aware. Not enough to wake up, not without a stimulus, of course. What he felt was unbridled rage. He thought back to his interactions with Kenjaku and realized something. In all his meetings he was used. For research. For a rebellion. For senseless murder. His mindset returned to that of a curse. He needs to kill humans. As fast and as most efficiently as possible. He needed to use some binding vows. Kenjaku's paw. Kenjaku was standing in the middle of a crater with Uraum, currently staring down multiple sorcerers. He had just absorbed Mahito and used his technique to start the culling games. Now he was talking specifically to Yuki Tsukumo and Yuji Itadori. Think of it as releasing 1000 malevolent Yuji Ida Keh. His hands immediately clamped over his mouth as cursed energy soared from his own technique. And astounding force barreled forward, pushing his hands out of the way. A small white and red ball flew out of his mouth, hitting the floor and smashing upon contact. A beast had awakened and was ravenous. The special grade cursed spirit had arrived. Snorlax immediately activated the cursed tool attached to him. The band, also known as a Dynamax band. Cursed energy surged, massive waves poured out transforming Snorlax. In Pokémon media, a Gigantamax Snorlax is around 11 feet 40 inches. In other words, around 35 meters tall. However, this is not a game. And Snorlax had abundant amounts of cursed energy. He grew, pushing past that limit. Snorlax was now 58 meters tall before stopping. Everyone stared in horror and bore witness to the strongest curse in history. Cursed Technique, Generation 7. Snorlax didn't let out a loud booming roar. He did something much different. Snore. Snore damages opponents and provides a 30% chance to flinch. The effect flinch stuns the opponent for a quick second. However, Snorlax had prepared. He had made a binding vow. The first time Snorlax uses Snore in battle makes it a 50% chance of making the opponent flinch. In exchange, that every other time he uses it in the same battle it becomes a 10% chance to make the opponent flinch. In other words, everyone currently near Snorlax is undergoing a 50% chance to be stunned. Snorlax used Snore. Snore was effective. All nearby beings will undergo the 50% chance. Yuki Tsukumo, not affected. Yuji Itadori, affected. Kenjaku, not affected. Urame, affected. Choso, affected. Momo Nishimiya, not affected. Panda, not affected. Norotoshi Kamo, not affected. Kusakabe, affected. Miwa, affected. Utahime, affected. Snorlax burst forward. Body slam. Its effect, high damage with 30% chance to paralyze. Under a binding vow, Snorlax has changed this. Its effect, lower damage with a 50% chance to paralyze and higher cursed energy cost. The target, Urame, is under the condition flinch and could not defend herself within that split second. Urame was sent flying back. Paralyze. Failed. Urame was not under the effects of flinch but was still thrown far back. Snorlax turned to punch Kenjaku, but he had jumped back. Kenjaku watched as Snorlax leapt towards him. Have fun with these, friends. Snorlax. He disappeared into the shadows as many cursed spirits erupted. Snorlax charged straight at them. Defensive curl. Defensive curl. Defensive curl. Defensive curl. Defensive curl. Defensive curl. Defensive curl is a move that upgrades the defense of the user. It can be stacked 6 times as 6 different stages. He leapt into the air. Giga Impact. Giga Impact is the physical equivalent of Hyper Beam. Its first use deals 100% damage and every use after deals less damage without charging back up. Landing directly in the middle, many cursed spirits instantly died. The impact threw the survivors into the air as the ground caved in. One special grade ran to escape, but he looked too juicy. Block. Its effect is to stop the opponent from fleeing. Snorlax instantly appeared in front of it with a surge of cursed energy. The special grade tried to block the incoming attack with cursed energy. Chip away. The effect ignores any changes to the defense stat. In this case, stats didn't exist, so it found the next best thing. Snorlax's arm pierced straight through the cursed spirit's body. Chip away made it so any cursed energy reinforcement did absolutely nothing for defense. Only special cases such as the physical body of Toji Fushiguro under the complete release of cursed energy making it zero would be able to defend from such an attack. The only other special case would be Yuji Itadori's physical body, created from the experiments of Kenjaku, that could hold against such an attack. Brother, Choso shouted, looking directly at Snorlax. Yuji followed Choso's vision to the giant beast. What the hell is my family tree? By now Snorlax's Gigantamax was wearing off and yet he remained, slaughtering as many curses as possible. He didn't even bother eating them, unless they jumped into his mouth he merely clawed through them like the enraged titan he is. Even as he shrunk he remained fighting, piercing multiple grade 1 cursed spirits at a time. The stronger cursed spirits realized the best method was to run as fast as possible. The unlucky ones who caught Snorlax's attention didn't make it far. Block. Another down, slapped by Snorlax's hand. It was completely crushed. Block. Another. Sliced by Snorlax's chop. Block. Another, 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 another. Until there was nothing left. All that remained was Snorlax, stood in the middle of an empty crater. Many had escaped. Choso and Yuji had ran away due to the chaos, supported by Yuki. And yet Choso stopped. He looked back at Snorlax, now alone. Brother. Tears formed in his eyes. Choso. Yuji had turned around and noticed Choso had stopped. Without missing a beat, Choso ran back towards Snorlax. Brother. Snorlax turned his head. He moved. Far too fast. Instantly appearing in front of Choso, he stood still. Ellipsis. It's you, I recognize your energy. You're the one who gave us strength while we were still the wombs. Snorlax. Snorlax nodded. Big brother. Choso sniffed. Snorlax rested a hand on Choso's head. Warmth flowed throughout the two. I know you've made many mistakes, but like me, we need to provide a good example for our younger brothers now. Yuji trailed behind, unsure of what to do. Snorlax left Choso and sat down in front of Yuji, placing a hand on his head and transferring a little of his unstable cursed energy. Whoa, Yuji looked at his arms in wonder. I feel stronger. Choso just nodded from behind. Yes, he did this for the rest of our brothers as well. Well, I'm not really sure about this whole brothers thing, but you seem like a good person, even if you did kill me. Snorlax stepped back from the two and looked off into the distance. Choso watched. You're leaving, Snorlax. He nodded before bringing the two together for a warming hug. Snorlax. Choso spoke into Snorlax's belly. Good luck, brother, I hope you can fix your mistake and join us later. Snorlax let go and was about to walk away before noticing Yuki. Oh, let me ask you something then. She walked forward. What kind of women is your type? Snorlax replied instantly. Snorlax. Ellipsis. With that, he took one last look at his brothers and bounded away. Snorlax wasn't sure of where he had to go, and so he ran in a random direction. It also happened to have high amounts of cursed energy residuals. Snorlax ran throughout the ruined and abandoned city. Many cursed spirits tried their luck or simply happened to be in the way. A large worm-like being that could float and move around coiled from within an abandoned car park and lashed out at Snorlax. Snorlax twisted and caught it with both hands, getting dragged along before trying to eat it. The worm flew upwards as Snorlax shoved it in his mouth. Now in a free fall, Snorlax fell onto a building with a resounding thud. The building creaked under the weight and Snorlax fell through multiple floors until he reached the bottom. He sat in silence before standing upright. Ellipsis. Slowly walking out, he noticed a very tall building, abandoned right now but definitely standing. In big glowing letters that ran across it read, Pokemon HQ. This threw Snorlax back to an old memory. Satoru grumbled while scrolling on his phone. Hey Suguru, you think we can sue the Pokemon guy? That's a ridiculous idea, Satoru, and what? Let the world know of cursed spirits. Hua. His glasses slipped off. I swear that he's gotta be a sorcerer, how else would they copy Snorlax to a T? Or maybe, he took the idea from historic records. Geto sighed and pulled up his document. K-hem. He cleared his throat. The Kaga Rebellion, 1487. Records show that the army was blessed with the divine presence sent by a higher power that flattened enemy troops. A specific record was found and pieced together that actually described the being. Large, plump and powerful, it rolled over enemy troops and provided enough hysteria for an easy win with minimal casualties to the rebels. Most notably, it had teal and cream colors. Satoru grabbed his fallen glasses. So we can still sue them, right? Geto facepalmed. That was not the point, Satoru. Satoru stood up and jumped onto Snorlax. Okay buddy, he said while whispering. If you ever come across something Pokemon related, make sure to get your revenge. Promise me one thing, destroy it all. Suguru came over and bonked Satoru on the head. Don't give him bad ideas, you won't do that, will you, Snorlax? Snorlax. Snorlax was dead serious. Translating. I promise you, Satoru. Unfortunately Geto didn't understand Snorlax's speech and thought that Snorlax had agreed with him. Now in the present Snorlax stared at the building. Let's get started. Cursed Technique, Generation 1. Snorlax's eyes narrowed. Hyperbeam. A huge beam of pure destruction arced up the building, incinerating all it touched. With a loud creak and the shattering of glass, the building slowly tilted before falling down with a booming crash. The dust rose and two menacing figures could be seen. It was Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori. Tajiri called out, "Well, well, well, we knew you'd come, Snorlax." Sugimori stood there in both silence and awe. Looks like I got the image completely right. Snorlax. Now that Snorlax had stated his entire cursed technique due to a binding vow, its output increased. Cursed Technique, Generation 3. Tajiri pulled out a Pokémon deck of cards and prepared to attack. Covet. Its effect is to steal the opponent's handheld item. And so he yoinked the cards and crushed them between his palms. Tajiri gasped and tried to launch backwards. Snorlax intended to follow up but noticed Sugimori trying to punch him. Defensive Curl X3. Snorlax didn't have enough time to stack 6 times and ended up getting pushed back 20 meters. Sugimori pressed onwards and attacked from the left. Tajiri had also caught up again and attacked from the right. Snorlax opened his mouth wide. Snore. Tajiri, effected. Sugimori, effected. Snorlax focused all his cursed energy precisely, pouring all his focus into a right-handed gut punch to Tajiri. Energy condensed around his fist as Satoru's voice echoed throughout his head. Destroy it all. Black and red lightning formed just before contact and ripped through space, distorting it. Black flash. Snorlax's punch embedded itself into Tajiri's gut, punching a hole through it and sending him flying. By now Sugimori was no longer stunned. Tajiri. He punched Snorlax with all his might as Snorlax similarly turned and met his fist with his own. Snorlax didn't falter. Black flash. His hand ripped through Sugimori's fist and sent him flying. Block. Snorlax appeared right behind the flying Sugimori. Hyperbeam. Snorlax's eyes glowed and he released a beam right into Sugimori, pinning him to the ground and tearing through flesh. A charred corpse remained, completely still. And to the victor goes the spoils. Snorlax ate the two before leaving. Content. The ruins of the building smoked, making Snorlax follow their trail into the air, noticing something. A huge circular barrier pierced the skies just a couple blocks away. Snorlax. Snorlax had decided to check it out. He slowly walked through the streets, taking him 20 minutes to arrive. A huge crowd of non-sorcerers were gathered outside, mostly confused and similarly staring at the barrier. It was a mix of awe and fear. Snorlax had no such qualms and jumped onto a building roof so he wouldn't crush anyone in the crowd and continued jumping before landing on the floor in front of the barrier. To the normal people, the buildings behind them creaked and groaned under an invisible weight before the ground in front of the barrier cracked. Snorlax. He pressed a hand against the barrier and felt it. It was solid, repelling his presence. Until a small Shikigami popped into existence. Hi, I'm a Kogan. Inside this barrier, a lethal contest called the Culling Games has begun. Step inside and you too become a player. Are you willing to enter? Snorlax looked at the huge barrier and concluded that Kenjaku was almost definitely behind this. Snorlax. Kogan faltered for a second. Snorlax has joined the Culling game. Snorlax nodded. Would you like to consult the rules? Snorlax nodded. Once more, Kogan flew in circles around Snorlax. Yap, yap yap, killing things, yap yap yap, adding rules, yap yap yap. Snorlax nodded seriously after listening with elite, super concentrated attention. He understood nothing. Snorlax pressed through the barrier and took in his surroundings. He was falling. Snorlax. Falling through the air, he spun around rapidly. The world blurred as he hit the water with a loud splash and fell into the depths while closing his eyes. Water pressed down and rippled as he sank. Upon opening his eyes, he noticed multiple glowing eyes tracking him through the water. Blue boo 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 boo. Translating. Snorlax. The curse barreled towards him and wrapped around his body. Due to being underwater, Snorlax wasn't quick enough to stop them. Blub. Snorlax. Dynamax banned. Snorlax's cursed energy surged and he expanded rapidly. The coiled curse didn't even manage to react before exploding under the immense pressure. Snorlax grew bigger and bigger until his head was above the water and his feet touched the ground. He let out a battle cry as many curses circled him. Bubbles rose due to the amount of energy caused by Snorlax's transformation and heated up the water rapidly. Smaller curses simply disintegrated and others rose to the surface completely limp. Snorlax splashed around creating large waves that pushed the cursed spirits away from him. Many curses that remained under the water were crushed due to the pressure generated. Snorlax swam to land and climbed on while shrinking back down. Kogan appeared. You have gained 45 points. He then disappeared. Snorlax looked around and saw many metal containers. A small cursed energy signature was hiding behind a container. Snorlax. Snorlax walked over to see a small and thin man. Don't kill me. He covered his face and jumped back. Snorlax walked closer. 3 other players jumped out from all sides. Snorlax lifted his right foot and stamped down on the ground hard. Pieces of the floor jumped up and the players lost balance. Cursed technique. Generation 1. Snore. 2 targets affected. Snorlax spun and grabbed the 2 stunned ones, shoving them into his mouth. The other 2 tried to attack Snorlax. Harden X4. Their attacks didn't even scratch him. Oh shit, we gotta. Snorlax chomped down and threw him into the air before catching the sorcerer in his mouth. The final one was the bait, still stuck in fear. You have gained 15 points. Kogan appeared quickly. Snorlax took one look at the player who had just peed themselves. He let him live and walked away. The sun was still high in the air and yet Snorlax crawled into a container. It creaked and groaned as Snorlax's belly pushed the ceiling upwards and Snorlax's arm shot through the sides so he could spread out. He fell asleep. Kashimo's paw. Why is everyone so weak? He was squatting down while biting his nails. Kogan, show me the points system. Scrolling through he saw something. Snorlax, a cursed spirit. He's got more points than me. Only a couple days in and they already have 60 points. He stood up and slung his staff over his shoulder. You should be a good warm-up for me. Grinning he walked off with a new plan. He needs more information to get 100 points and then have all information about a player displayed. It was simply the best way to find the strongest people. Snorlax awoke and sat upright. His body ripped through the metal container like it was nothing, leaving a suspiciously Snorlax-shaped hole in his wake. Yawning, he looked around. There was nothing, so he decided to walk down the canal route not too far away. Snorlax. Standing atop one of the canal railings was a sorcerer. Huh, is that a Pokemon? Correction, a modern-day sorcerer. With short black hair and one green eye he stood there. Snorlax, Snorlax. Hey Kogan, aren't you going to get copyright striked for that? Kogan popped into existence. We have no association with this specific player. A player, show me their stats. He looked up from the Kogan's interface and at Snorlax slowly. This is not worth losing another eye over. He closed his one right eye. Fuck it. The air behind him heated up before exploding, propelling him right into Snorlax. He spun midair with seemingly no control until he exploded the air once more and bounced over Snorlax's attempt to hit him. His fist was covered in cursed energy and slammed into Snorlax, actually turning Snorlax's head with force. Snorlax tried to swipe at the player but the air between them heated up and exploded once more. Snorlax was slightly charred now and the player was sent back flying onto the ground above the canal. He bounced and skidded before coming to a stop. Ow, that hurts. His clothes were either ripped or smoldering, revealing an enormous amount of injuries across his body. Scorch marks and scars covered his body as he stood up once more. The hell are you made o'? He looked up to see Snorlax looming. Gulp. Snorlax's fist crashed into him and sent him flying. Snorlax walked down and looked into the now destroyed storefront that the sorcerer had crashed into. Oh come on. An energy-based system without regeneration. What the hell is this? This sorcerer had no idea what the reverse curse technique is. Truly a modern-day sorcerer. Snorlax wasn't sure if this was a fight. In a way he kind of felt bad for the player. A curse had been hiding in the building and it launched at the player. The air exploded once more, demolishing the wall and the curse at the same time. In the dust Snorlax could see the player standing back up. Why can't my attack do that to you? Come on now. Snorlax just scratched his head. Seriously, is this a fight or not? Far in the distance Snorlax detected quite the meal. An electrical discharge had went off, so it would probably taste spicy. Snorlax is all for new things however. Looking back the player had disappeared. Snorlax. Truly a modern-day sorcerer. Snorlax was confused. Why did people keep charging at him in groups? Did they have no honor, no integrity? It's not like he was evil or anything. Just because he's a cursed spirit doesn't make him a bad guy. They're all just racist if you think about it. Snorlax was a big supporter of equal rights. His hands were rated E for eating. Regardless of person he will eat you basically. Speaking of, a tall woman with blonde hair charged at Snorlax, who was currently sitting atop a small pile of corpses. How could you? Snorlax. Translating. You attacked me. Raaa. Squelch. She looked down. A single claw from Snorlax's outstretched hand pierced her lungs. Snorlax. Snorlax was starting to get sick of this rinse and repeat. It had been 4 days, and yet the person he actively wanted to find kept going in the wrong direction. Kashimo must be ducking the fate or something. Kashimo's pav. Where the hell are the strong opponents? Kashimo was getting seriously annoyed, and to annoy him even further that damn cursed spirit kept getting more and more points. Tisk. He had no idea that he was technically moving away from Snorlax. You have earned 5 points. His total point total was only at 160 after 5 days in the culling games. Snorlax's was at 205 total. Damn it. I can't find the warm-up or Sukuna. His hands combed through his hair. And what is this growing need to eat waffles? What the hell even are waffles? Who knows Kashimo, who knows? It seems that smurfing isn't very fun. Ellipsis. What does smurfing mean again? He stood up and wandered off. Away from both Snorlax and Sukuna. He had also completely forgotten about the rule system. Snorlax made sure to take time to rest of course, it was the only reason he hadn't caught up to Kashimo yet. The only thing that could get in the way of Snorlax and a meal would be a nice sleep. Pissed. A humanoid curse was attached to the ceiling. It drooled with its mouth wide open and eyes that darted all over the place. Snorlax has no fear. He attacked. Biting off its head and swallowing the rest of the body followed instantly. Snorlax. He continued his search for a spicy meal. Leaving his rest spot he found a corpse on the floor, Kashimo's energy still residing on it. He was getting closer, he could feel it. After 3 days he had done it, he had actually seen Kashimo. Snorlax's Kogan appeared as Kashimo stood up and looked over at Snorlax. RRRIIIIIIINNNNNGGG. RIIING. A player has added a new rule to the culling game. Rule 9. Players shall have access to the following information about other players: name, points, number of rules added and current colony. Ellipsis. Snorlax. He understood a little. Kashimo's cursed energy rocketed and crackled as he vanished from view. Cursed technique. Generation 1. Harden X6. Kashimo's staff collided with Snorlax's side just after the 6th stage of Harden activated. It wasn't very effective. Oh. Kashimo grinned as Snorlax's arm swung at him. He landed and leapt over the arm, throwing his staff at the floor. It embedded into the ground as Kashimo punched Snorlax's arm. It didn't do much. Kashimo skidded back. You're tough. Snorlax charged. He kicked the ground, sending pebbles at Kashimo who jumped above them. Snorlax jumped into a headbutt which sent Kashimo flying. Hyper beam. The brilliant red beam hit Kashimo in the chest but Kashimo had twisted to avoid it with minimal damage. The minimal damage however, had caused nearly his entire chest to get burned. Snorlax intended to move forward but the staff in the ground crackled and exploded, putting a big hole in his side. Cursed energy surged to heal it but Kashimo followed the attack with a rising kick. Just as Snorlax was pushed back and healed the wound another discharge went off where he was just kicked, exploding his arm. Hyper beam. Snorlax needed time to heal and so tried to push Kashimo back but he dodged past it and tried to punch Snorlax. But it was a trap. Snorlax could actually stop the hyper beam whenever he wanted and while the beam was still flowing Kashimo didn't notice that it wasn't being generated until it was too late. Snorlax bit off Kashimo's outstretched arm and flung him into the air, directly above him. Hyper Beam. It directly hit Kashimo, charring him into unconsciousness. He fell to the ground with a loud thud. Snorlax picked up the corpse and swallowed it whole. Snorlax. It was very tasty. You have gained 5 points. Snorlax was tired. After all, he had just used 4% of his power to win against Kashimo. And so he decided to go to sleep, in the open, where anyone could easily find him. Truly a tactical genius. Yuji Itadori's POV. Yuji had been talking to Hikari after managing to make him listen instead of beating Yuji up. Until a Kogan appeared. RRIIIIIIINNNNGGG. RRIINNGG. A player has added a new rule to the culling game. Rule 9. Players shall have access to the following information about other players: name, points, number of rules added and current colony. The Kogan looked around before realizing that they were in fact not within the culling game's barrier. I am a Kogan, a liaison between players and the game. Ellipsis. Why is no one talking? A little while later, Megumi was speaking. Itadori, have your Kogan show player info right now. Kogan, can you? Yep. Kogan's stomach opened up, revealing the list of players. Megumi scrolled intently. That one. He pointed at Kashimo, who currently had 100 points. So this player previously had 200 points. I wonder why. The interface flickered and a small chibi Kogan could be seen, whirring as the list reloaded. Huh. Megumi was taken aback. Kogan, search up Kashimo. The interface changed once again as 3 dots loaded on the screen. It showed Kashimo's stats, but the stickman beside the name had changed and now had a skull instead of a smiley face. Huh. Yuji was confused. Kogan, does the skull mean that the player is dead? Yes. Ellipsis. Everyone was silent. Kogan, show me only players with 100 points or more. The Kogan searched before showing only 2 people. Here you go. Kogan chirped. Nice. Yuji pumped a fist in the air. Wait a minute, Snorlax. Megumi looked over at Yuji in confusion. Panda also joined in. You mean that Snorlax? Yuji turned around to look at Panda, also in confusion. Megumi narrowed his eyes. How do you guys know this player? Yuji pondered for a second. Technically he's my brother. Megumi's face twitched. Panda also pondered. He's Gojo's friend. It was Yuji's turn to twitch. Huh. Panda stood there in silence. Ellipsis. Hikari chimed in. Who the fuck is this guy? Panda cut in first. I've seen him before. He's a friend from when Gojo was younger. I saw him once before, with Gojo's friend who did the night parade thing around a year ago. Between then and now I've only seen him once, in Shibuya. All heads turned to Yuji. He scratched his head. Well, he's Choso's quarter brother or something, maybe an uncle. Anyway, Choso is my brother, so I'd guess we're family in some way. Ellipsis. Megumi sighed. This is a good thing then. We can all go to Tokyo Colony 2 to find Snorlax and get him to add rules. He has enough points for everything. Or we can split into teams of 2 to get Higuruma's points as well. By the time we find Snorlax he could have added a rule. Wait, what rules are we adding again? Panda and Yuji said in unison. First would be to allow people to transfer points, and second would be to allow the usage of points to leave the culling game. Everyone went deep into thought. They decided to make 2 teams to go into the 2 colonies. Team 1 would be Yuji and Megumi, they had experience working together. Team 2 would be Panda and Hikari, they did not have experience working together. And so they began the travel to the Tokyo colonies. Meanwhile, Snorlax had woken up after a long nap. He had no idea what he wanted to do, maybe go sightseeing. Yes, sightseeing. And so he started his travels to the edge of the barriers. Where is the edge again? The buildings happened to block Snorlax's view from all surroundings. Now walking around would be one way of finding the edge. Boot. Panda's paw. Panda had joined the culling game. Specifically Tokyo Colony number 2 because that was where Snorlax was. But finding Snorlax in such a small place would surely be very hard. The area is huge, given even Snorlax's size he would be hard to find. A cherry on top was also that Hikari wasn't with him, they had both been teleported into separate locations. Currently Panda had two options. Go into a city area. Or, go into a shipping container area. But what choice should he? Boom. A massive explosion went off in the city as huge buildings collapsed and plumes of smoke and dust rose. Panda turned around to see two gleaming red eyes illuminate the billowing smoke. A huge, demonic sound echoed throughout the colony. It rumbled like the end of the world was coming. The dust settled and a gigantic Snorlax towered over the now ruined buildings. I think I found him. Snorlax's paw. Snorlax used his Dynamax band and rose to peer over the buildings, trying to find the closest part of the barrier. Unfortunately, he didn't take into account the fact that he had gotten a little too excited by his spicy meal. It seemed he hadn't properly digested the meal and this caused him to grow just a little too big. Due to the dust, he accidentally sneezed while trying to look for the barrier. He then walked towards the closest part of the barrier while simultaneously shrinking. Snorlax. And so his journey began. Meanwhile, Hikari had gotten distracted fighting a certain mangaka. He was on a roll after all. Snorlax had made it to the barrier with nothing in his way. Maybe they had been in so much awe at the awesomeness of Snorlax that he had become a deity in their minds and decided that they couldn't possibly try to talk to such a figure. Who knows, Snorlax certainly didn't. In actuality, they were trying to find King Kong to help. Alas, he doesn't exist unlike a certain other. Snorlax looked once more at the barrier and then went to touch it. Snorlax held out his hand against the barrier. It was solid. Kogan popped out. You cannot leave the culling game. Snorlax looked at Kogan intently. Snorlax. Rules will not let you leave the culling game. Snorlax swiped at the flying Shikigami. Do you want to make a new rule? Snorlax. Ellipsis. A player could leave the culling game by expending 100 points to invite a new player into the culling game as a substitute. Snorlax shook his head. A player can exit and enter across colony borders. Snorlax thought for a second. That sounds like it counts as a sightseeing trip. He nodded. Approved. Rule 10. Players may enter and exit across colony borders. Snorlax grunted as Panda rounded the corner. Just as Snorlax was about to leave, he heard a shout. Snorlax. Wait a minute. Snorlax turned his head. He remembered Panda from before. He also remembered the promise he made to Satoru. Panda is a student of Satoru. The promise was to help Satoru's students. Therefore Snorlax should help Panda. He took a seat as Panda ran over. Don't tell me, was that added rule from you just now? Snorlax nodded slowly. He felt like he was in trouble for some reason. Oh no, we needed 2 rules to be added. Panda joined Snorlax on the floor. Now we have to rely on Yuji and Megumi getting the 100 points from Higuruma. Snorlax patted Panda on the head. He recognized Yuji's name. I think the best course of action is to join them in the other colony now that we can cross the borders. Snorlax had blanked that entire conversation and so the two sat there in silence. 15 minutes later, after Snorlax was beginning to doze off, Panda finally realized that Snorlax was waiting for him to make the first move. Right. Follow this Panda then. Snorlax didn't move, he was asleep. Oh. Panda had to stay with Snorlax the entire time. Snorlax is a heavy sleeper after all. During that time Panda had nothing to do. So, once Snorlax finally woke up, they left the colony. Panda jolted upright immediately. Snorlax. They added a new rule. Snorlax's Kogan appeared. Rule 11. Players may transfer a number of points of their choosing to another player. Snorlax contemplated for a second. He really was quite hungry. Surely a shop owner wouldn't care if he stole just a couple of snacks. They're in a literal war zone, so no one would notice, right? He looked down at Panda, who was pushing his index fingers together. So, could you transfer a point to me, pretty please? Snorlax had no concept of money or points, so he just looked at Kogan. As you wish. Panda's Kogan appeared. Snorlax has transferred 1 point. Yup. Panda did a little dance before pointing at Snorlax. Now let's get going. Snorlax stood up and began the long journey, a journey where Panda was actively losing his mind trying to get Snorlax to stop taking so many rests. Hikari's paw. Hikari had just been beating up fodder when he called for his Kogan. Kogan, what colony is Panda in? Tokyo number 1. And where is Snorlax? Tokyo number 1. And where am I? Tokyo number 2. These pricks have forgotten about me. Panda was not happy, this might be the worst time he's ever had. And he's seen his father's corpse in front of him before. Snorlax was unresponsive, lazy and heavy. Panda had to go into his gorilla mode to carry him or even drag him, and even that doesn't work very well because he simply doesn't have enough cursed energy to maintain the form for a long period of time. Days. It took days. The only slight peace Panda got was that people started to avoid Snorlax. So no fighting. Unless a curse got too excited, but if that happened then Snorlax would just sleep kill the curse. Basically Panda would hide next to Snorlax and poke his side to force him to roll over, killing the curse immediately. Sometimes Snorlax would grab Panda while sleeping and not let go, it didn't hurt. Snorlax was a professional at holding back, he was even trained by Satoru. Satoru, could you help Snorlax learn restraint? Geto was sitting outside the basketball court in the sun. I guess. Satoru jumped up and clapped his hands together. Okay Snorlax. Grab me with care. Snorlax's hand closed around Satoru's middle, a little too hard. Hey. Snorlax let go and Satoru activated Infinity. Alright then, now that you can't touch me, try to have more restraint than before. Snorlax didn't understand the concept, he believed he had just been challenged. And Snorlax is anything but a wimp. Domain amplification. Snorlax's hand squeezed past Satoru's Infinity. Satoru struggled to get free. Suguru. Help me, he rasped. Gah, I can see the light. Satoru's eyes swam and closed. Oh, Snorlax. Stop. Geto sat up and dismissed Snorlax. Satoru fell limp into Geto's arms. Shoko. Geto screamed a little too high for a man of his age. Shoko skidded around the corner. What the hell happened? She saw Satoru's soon-to-be corpse. Oh. Snorlax woke up. He is alive, in fact, why is Panda sleeping? That lazy little boy, honestly no wonder Satoru asked him to look after his students. Moving on however, he could sense a little of his energy in the distance. Snorlax grabbed Panda by the legs and swung him around. Snorlax. Snorlax pointed in Yuji's direction. He was still spinning Panda. Put me down. Snorlax put him down slowly. HMPH. That's got to be animal abuse. Snorlax scratched his head and moved forward. Hey, wait a second. Panda tumbled around, knocking things all over the floor. Snorlax. Translating. Tut, tut, tut. You did this to me. Clatter. I know what you're insinuating there. Crash. Panda had fallen down, and so with a sigh Snorlax slung him over his shoulder. And continued his march.